Guaranteed. You know what would happen within 10 years? I bet you more than anything. America pulls out with no exit strategy, no long-term plan for supporting these countries. These countries fail, and they turn into, I mean, we're talking Cambodia level. We're talking fields of corpses. China will come in with boots on the ground and fix their problems, and they'll be Chinese vassal states for the next century.
For U.S. foreign policy, were leftists in charge of the decision to invade Afghanistan? To stay there for years and years and years? No.
There's been a vast amount of lying on this topic, including an article which happens to be right before me in today's Daily Camera.
Which I wrote.
Which you wrote. Well, let me describe to you the... Okay. Then, fine. Then let me... You asked me to talk about your particular lie. I will now talk about it, okay? If you wanted me to talk about other lies, I'll talk about them.
Damn! Wow! Look at this guy! Look at this debate, bro! When people work with us, they're called collaborators. They're seen as traitors, and rightly so, because we are an outside entity coming in telling them how to run their country, right? If you want to ride with Biden, do it like this. NCC here, your friendly neighborhood dramabaiter. I am here with an NCC quickie, which means that we're going to do this during the middle of the day. We're going to do this quick, and we're going to answer a question. What is the question today? The question is, was Vaush canceled again? Let's find out.
We're 3 seconds in, okay? Let's see. Now, a weak man might look at this and think, oh God, what have I done? What did I say? But since I know that everything that I say is based in red pill, yeah, here, Jimmy Dore retweeted, of course, Caleb Maupin, nothing but the brightest minds. Let's go! I think Ian Miles Chong also tweeted this.
So we're talking about tankies, and we're talking about class reductionist, and we're talking about dipshit Nazgul vortex tangential useful idiots like Jimmy Dore.
We pulled out. If we allow these countries to destabilize, you know what happened within 10 years?
That's who canceled Vaush. So first of all, I'd say that Vaush, people like that disliking you, that's not a cancellation. That's a badge of honor.
Guaranteed. You know what would happen within 10 years? I bet you more than anything. America pulls out with no exit strategy, no long-term plan for supporting these countries. These countries fail, and they turn into, I mean, we're talking Cambodia level. We're talking fields of corpses. China will come in with boots on the ground and fix their problems, and they'll be Chinese vassal states for the next century. If we pull... Wait, that's... Cancelled for being based and correct pilled, once again. Honestly. Completely 100% true. The funny thing is, I see... Look, I think this is a fan of mine. He's not arguing for... Wait, is this Nathan Robinson? Oh no! Nathan Robinson disagrees with us. Uh-oh! Oh no! Not Nathan Robinson. This person says, he's not arguing for the U.S. to remain in other countries, he's arguing against pulling out without an exit strategy, like you mentioned in the clip. I understand the U.S. is imperialistic, we can't just leave without some plan, let's be realistic. And then Nathan Robinson says, exit strategy is a piece of empty rhetoric deployed to justify endless occupation. The reason you know is that there's never any feasible strategy actually proposed. Empty words that help you sound smart and pragmatic without having a realistic alternative except endless war. Oh no! That's a really stupid talking point. Uh-oh. That's unfortunate. So the funny thing is that this this video propped up like the same day that the Taliban made huge surges after Biden started to pull out U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Like this happened like at the same time that the universe was proving me correct. You know. Jen Perelman, hold on. I think that we're gonna have to burn some bridges here. I disagree with Vaush military occupation in the Middle East. These countries became destabilized due to our presence there in the first place. When did I say otherwise? Well, wait. First of all, I'm pro the United States pulling out of Afghanistan. I don't think I actually said otherwise explicitly in that clip. I just said that bad things would happen if we did. See, the problem is there are a lot of people on the left, I guess Kyle Kalinske fits in on this too, whose understanding of foreign policy is as simple as like no more war, anti-interventionism, no more war, and like that's it. And it's like really, really simple basic stuff. You know?
So it's like a Jimmy Dore concept of foreign policy or anything like that. You know, it's like force the vote. It's like a simple thing of like, you know, oh God, I hate to say it, but ideological purity, right? But at the expense of policy feasibility, right? That's what we're talking about with Jimmy Dore. And, you know, maybe there's some of that. What I would say is that how do we get into this place, though, where Vaush is defending U.S. foreign policy at all, right? Were leftists responsible for U.S. foreign policy? Were leftists in charge of the decision to invade Afghanistan? To stay there for years and years and years? No. Then why should we take responsibility? Why should we have to answer the question of what you do? What you do at this point is a choice of evils, yes. But as far as the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, the writing's on the wall there, okay? The Taliban was in charge of Afghanistan before, and the Taliban is going to be in charge of Afghanistan in some form after we leave, okay? I don't know. I kind of don't like this. You can see where the roots of this were planted, though. When Vaush got behind Biden, and listen, I vote for harm reduction too, okay? If I got a chance to get Trump out of office, I'll make that vote. The difference with me and Vaush is I never made Biden cool. Or at least I tried not to. I played that hairy legs thing more than a few times. Maybe that was a mistake, right? But I don't think anybody in my audience thought Biden was cool. I don't think anybody in my audience thought Biden was based. Vaush has now got to do some work to kind of like pull his audience back and say, hey, look, we supported this guy in the election against Trump. Understand that we're leftists and he's nowhere near us. And in order to get him to do better, we've got to be not on his side. We've got to be seen as another faction. We've got to be seen as leftists. We can't be like lumping ourselves in with the Democratic, supporters, right? We've got to be pushing them to the left. There's not a lot of good choices here. Like I said, Vaush mentioned Cambodia. Let's take a little detour there. Okay, so I brought the Wikipedia, I can't speak. Wikipedia up earlier. I kind of feel like it's somewhat useless though. I kind of don't like what the Wikipedia told me, because the Wikipedia suggested that the Vietnam War just kind of naturally spread to Cambodia, and that the US responded to that by bombing Cambodia. From my understanding, the decision to bomb Cambodia is what caused the war to spread. So I kind of want to interrogate this question because it seems to be important. Dylan's Entertainment Channel. I don't think that's our Dylan. What connects the U.S. and Pol Pot's murderous Khmer regime? This is the nomadic professor. Oh, here we go. Here's our boy. Here's Noam Chomsky. Let's hear it from Noam Chomsky.
Your conversion to realizing that Pol Pot was a mass murderer, and you've finally seen the light on that, have you, Mr. Chomsky?
No,
I was about to say he sounds so young. No, he always sounded old.
I've seen exactly the light that I saw at the beginning. There's been a vast amount of lying on this topic, including an article which happens to be right before me in today's Daily Camera.
Which I wrote.
Which you wrote. Well, let me describe to you okay. Then fine. Then let me. Okay. There's no time here. It takes a phrase to produce a lie and 10 minutes to decode it. So I'll just take one.
Sass is better than salt.
Let's take the Pol Pot atrocities. Okay. You say here somewhere that everybody knows that Pol Pot killed 2 million people, or some phrase to that extent, something like that. Okay, let's look at that 2 million people and what I wrote about it.
He killed no one, according to you, right? This book by you say he killed virtually no one.
After the cataclysm.
Yes.
And you can look and check exactly what I'm saying.
You said it was a well-orchestrated campaign of hysteria.
May I finish
yes.
on the 2 million? Okay. The figure of 2 million people killed was produced in February 1977. This is all described in detail in the book, by Jean Lacouture, a French journalist, who was reviewing a book by a French priest named François Panchaud, which had just come out in French. It was fine. About a year or two later, it was translated into English. You can read it if you don't read French. It was called Cambodia Year Zero. That was the only book
France
at that point
was involved
by anyone
heavily
who had
in
any
the occupation of
direct
Vietnam
or
before the
plausible
US.
knowledge of what was going on in Cambodia. So it was an important book. It appeared in France in January 1977. It was immediately reviewed in the New York Review of Books, translating an article, a review that just appeared in France.
You kind of come to the point.
I'll get to the point. I'll get to the point. I told you it takes 10 minutes to decode a lie, and I'm now decoding it. Okay. In this review, Jean Lacouture stated that according to Panchaud, Pol Pot had killed, in fact, boasted. They didn't talk about Pol Pot because nobody knew him then. He said the Khmer Rouge have boasted, that was his word, of killing 2 million people. That's where the figure of 2 million comes from that you've heard over and over again since. Well, I was interested. I hadn't seen figures like that. And the book was not available in the United States. Incidentally, Lacouture's review was immediately picked up by the press, quoted all over the place. Oh, isn't this fantastic? I mean, horrifying. They've killed 2 million people. Incidentally, in July 1975, 2 years earlier, the New York Times had already accused them of genocide. But now we had support from Panchaud, the French priest. High source says they killed 2 million people. Well, I had no opinion on it one way or another. So I did the obvious thing. I wrote to some friends in France and asked them to mail me the book, because no copy of it existed in the United States. It was being quoted all over the place. Everybody was quoting it, but it didn't exist. So I got a copy of the French book. And here's what I discovered. Here's the source of your 2 million figures. I discovered that, according to Panchaud, the United States was responsible for the death of 800,000 Cambodians in the bombing, in the war in the first half of the decade. And then he says, according to the American embassy, the Pol Pot regime is responsible for 1.2 million deaths from all causes, including killing, starvation, overwork, etc. All right, Lacouture read that. He added up the two figures, the alleged claim of the American embassy and Panchaud's claim about the American war, added them up, comes to 2 million, attributed it all to Pol Pot. That was the 2 million figure. Well, I did the next obvious thing. I wrote a personal letter to Lacouture in which I said, look, I don't know what's going on in Cambodia, but you misquoted Panchaud. I gave a series of misquotes. It turns out that every reference of his to the book was
May I
a total
interrupt you for a moment?
May I continue?
We have some Cambodian
May I continue?
older.
I will just a second. You asked me to talk about your particular lie. I will now talk about it, okay? If you wanted me to talk about other lies, I'll talk about them.
Damn! Wow! Look at this guy! Look at this debate,
if you'll bear with me on this, it's a very illuminating story about the way a system of indoctrination works and about the way commissars work. Let's continue.
He's a connoisseur.
May I continue? May I continue? You don't want me. You don't want to. It's plain that you don't want to hear this, and I understand why. But let me continue anyway. I won't take the time to go through the other lies. I just mentioned that one. Okay. I mentioned to Lacouture that his falsification of Ponchot's book was now being widely quoted, and I thought that was improper. I thought he ought to report what Ponchot actually said. He then wrote an article which appeared in the United States, in which he thanked me for calling to his attention a number of errors. In fact, it turned out everything that he referred to was totally false, but let's forget that. And he corrected a few of them, not all, but a few. In the case of the number of people killed, here's what he said. He said maybe the number killed was thousands or hundreds of thousands. But he said, did it really matter? In other words, did it really matter whether the actual number was in the thousands or in the millions? No, he said, it doesn't matter, it's about the same. And everyone thought that was just wonderful and very heroic. And after that, everyone continued to quote the 2 million figure. Even after he had said, well, maybe it's in the thousands, and of course I misquoted. Now, just imagine that somebody were to say that about an American atrocity, you know? I mean, like in El Salvador, the United States is responsible for 50,000 deaths in the last 5 years. Suppose somebody came along and said, well, it's 50 million deaths, or 5 billion deaths, a factor of 1,000. Suppose somebody wrote, the United States is responsible for 5 billion deaths, you know, or 50 million deaths in El Salvador. And then suppose somebody said, well, look, you know, you misquoted and so on. And he says, well, after all, what's a factor of 1,000, you know? I mean, we would think that that's ludicrous. Of course a factor of 1,000 matters. It matters whether...
The guy's point, though, like, to play devil's advocate a little bit, the guy's point was he killed a lot of people, and that is true. Like, the Pol Pot regime was fucked up. It was, yeah, like, there was murder. There was a lot of murder, okay? That's the point. So I think that's what the point the other guy was making was that, like, you know, how many murders, like, wasn't so much the issue as much as that there were murders. The thing that figure obscures, though, is that we take 800,000 deaths caused by what? Khmer Rouge? No. U.S. foreign policy. Kissingerian, Nixonian, Johnsonian, probably, too. From the looks at the time of the time table here, like U.S. foreign policy causing a large percentage of those deaths, and the rest of the numbers not being solid at all. But yes, the Khmer Rouge was fucked up. Yes, the Khmer Rouge did kill a lot of people. Was it caused by the U.S. pulling out all of a sudden? I don't think that Vaush was trying to imply that. I think that Vaush was just using Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge as an example of, you know, a disastrous foreign policy outcome without really interrogating the reason for it. But it's just a little ironic that the one that Vaush chooses is the one that's got a lot of U.S. foreign policy mistakes. And I don't just mean leading up to causing Pol Pot to, you know, do the deaths, which you could argue that too, but actually the decision to do the bombing, contributing a great number of the pain of the deaths, a great amount of the pain and misery in Cambodia. So yeah, that's the first thing I'm noticing here. Let's go on.
It's thousands killed is an atrocity, but millions killed, in particular a boast of millions killed, that's a very different atrocity. Factor of these things didn't matter.
So the number came from the Khmer Rouge itself, boasting about like the number of people that they killed. So yeah, that shows us there that the Khmer Rouge, it's a murderous government. It's a fucked up government, a government that's like literally flexing the number of people killed. But look at how they're just as happy as the U.S. is to fold the bombing deaths into that number.
Well, a factor of 100, a factor of 1,000, all of those things matter. Now, I wrote an article, and after Lacouture said he didn't think it mattered, not I, in fact, but a colleague of mine named Edward Herman, economist at the University of Pennsylvania, he and I wrote an article in The Nation in which we gave the first actual review of Ponchot's book. Ponchot's book is the standard source on this, and we wrote the first review of it. I discount Lacouture's review because everything in it was totally false. The book had not yet appeared in English.
There's a lot here. This is drama. This is definitely...
June 25th, 1977.
There's a lot to go through here.
And in it, we praised Ponchot's book as serious
and it's true about foreign policy in general.
With its record of the grisly atrocities committed by the Khmer Rouge and their barbarity. And we said we have no idea what the actual numbers are. How could we know? But on the basis of his book, they're probably serious. And we ran through the range of... we also said we disagreed with Lacouture about the question of a factor of 1,000. We thought it mattered whether the number killed was in the thousands or the millions. Incidentally, in the same review, we also pointed out that Ponchot had very significantly exaggerated the atrocities due to the American bombing. You'll notice that nobody's minded that. We've never been criticized for pointing out that Ponchot exaggerated the number of killings due to the United States. Excuse me. No, he's not. I'll go on with the rest. Yeah, that was the first book that existed, and it's the major source. Okay, and that's all we wrote at that time.
So it sounds like the numbers themselves that they had at the time
the book that you're talking about was written in 1978, and it appeared in 1979 after the fall of the Pol Pot regime. Written in 1978, it used more evidence up through early 1978. Now, in that book, we started off by saying that the Khmer Rouge are responsible for what we called gruesome atrocities, and we went on to describe them. And but our book was not about Cambodia. It was about the American propaganda system. This is one chapter in a 2-volume work on the American propaganda system, in which we compared the way the other guys' atrocities are treated with the way our atrocities are treated. And the point that we made with 2 volumes of documentation is that when it's the other guys' atrocities, the press vastly exaggerates them and fabricates and so on, and with our atrocities, they suppress them and remain quiet about them and so on. One of dozens of cases discussed is Cambodia, and we pointed out this example, but we also pointed out something else. We pointed out that the only people who knew anything about Cambodia was American intelligence. Okay? I mean, they actually had evidence about Cambodia. They were monitoring it closely. And in fact, by then, I had contacted State Department intelligence to find out what they were saying, and it's given in there. What they were saying, first of all, they said that this claim of Ponchot's about 1.2 million was an invention. They had never produced any such thing. And then they said, and in fact, this was said in public, and we quoted in the book in mid-1977, which is about the latest evidence, they said that the number of people killed by, they said that no doubt that they're atrocities, they said it's in the tens or hundreds of thousands, not from mass genocide, but from brutal overwork and harsh conditions. So American intelligence estimate was tens or hundreds of thousands, and we cited that as well. We came out with no conclusion of our own about the numbers. In fact, we ended up by saying, well, maybe the 2 million figure will turn out to be right, even if it was totally fabricated. But tentatively, we assumed that American intelligence was probably right. Okay? Now let's turn to the last point. Now there's a lot of evidence. See, after the fall of the Pol Pot regime, a lot of evidence came out. Okay, I've now finished with everything I wrote about the topic, which was perfectly accurate. No one has ever found one minor error.
Just like Vaush,
lies, like what you
based
just heard,
in red
but no
pill.
error. Now let's turn to another question. What the actual numbers are. Well, here you can turn to subsequent scholarship. It's certainly not known in detail, but there is subsequent scholarship. In fact, there are 2 major sources at the moment. One of them is a book on the Pol Pot period by the only authentic Cambodia scholar who has written on the topic, Michael Vickery. He's actually American. In fact, he was actually in the Foreign Service. He's a specialist on Cambodia, speaks Khmer. His wife's family was all massacred by Pol Pot. He worked in the refugee camps and so on, and he has a book called Cambodia, 1975 to 1979, in which he gives a detailed demographic study, region by region, putting together whatever evidence he could, and so on and so forth. The book was very highly praised in England by Indochina scholars and so on and so forth. It's never been reviewed in the United States, so it was published here. His conclusion is that, except in marginal journals, in fact, the professor here reviewed it in the monthly review. I will tell you, because this is important, that's why. Do you want to know the answer to this question or don't you? You don't, okay. Well, all right, let me just ask for a show of hands. How many people want me to give you this answer? Okay. Then, final remark, what is his, do you want to hear what the scholarly record shows? Yes, okay. His estimate is that the total number who died above what would be expected if you had regular population growth is about 700,000. There's another study by the one government that carried out an official inquiry into this, the government of Finland. Of course, again, never mentioned in the United States. They come out with somewhat lower estimates. The State Department journal Problems of Communism came out with a still lower estimate. There are people, incidentally, who are apologists for Pol Pot. The government scholar Douglas Pike, who now heads the Indochina Resource Center, according to him, Pol Pot was, I'm quoting, the charismatic leader of the peasant revolution, under whom the population didn't suffer anywhere near as much as they said. However, I haven't said any of these things. I've just reported facts. Now, why does that bother people so much? Because what Herman and I did was we took the position that it is not proper to lie, either in suppressing the crimes of your own state or exaggerating the crimes of an official enemy. And of course, the commissars who insist on the right to lie are outraged by this. You want to go on to the next slide, this one having been discussed?
Oh my god, okay, wow, that was spicy. That was, whoever says that, people were not spicy back in the day. These were some spicy debate bros, right? How the U.S. brought Pol Pot to power. A lot of people think this. A lot of people, and this is the way I've seen it put too, that the United States foreign policy. Okay, so what we got, let me break this down for you, okay? We've got a king in Cambodia. I'll look at the wiki. I just don't want anybody to think I get all my information from wiki, right? Okay, so we got a king. The king's name is Sihanouk. It's a monarchy. The U.S. deposes him, puts in a pro-US republic, the Khmer Republic, right? King doesn't like this. He links up with Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge emerges as the major power, taking the biggest city, then carries out the Cambodian genocide from 75 until 79. Okay, so this is after the U.S. has left Vietnam, right? So maybe this is where Vaush is getting this idea that the U.S. is, he never said it, though, and I don't want to put these words in his mouth, okay, chat? Vaush is not somebody that thinks that, like, we could have won that's not what Vaush is saying. I don't think that's what Vaush is saying at all. I think what he's saying is that foreign policy is a delicate thing, and when you try to just, be like, all right, pull out, war bad, pull out, right? That you get some fucked up results. And so you shouldn't do it without strategizing it. I think that's what Vaush's claim is, but it's funny. I'm just noting that it is funny that he picked this particular conflict, that the U.S. had a lot to do with. In fact, you could even say everything to do with the deaths in Cambodia, right? But certainly a lot to do in terms of the bombing campaigns that we conducted there. And so for Noam Chomsky to step in there and kind of take responsibility for U.S. foreign policy, and he does. You listen to what he says. We, especially at this time when the U.S. audience is so concentrated amongst 3 networks, right? There's 3 news networks, right? So there's one narrative, right? This is the military-industrial complex somewhat writing the narrative. There can be dissension. There was dissension. Walter Cronkite famously kind of broke away from the narrative, pointed out how badly things were going in Vietnam, and was maybe the beginning of the end. Like Nixon famously said when he saw Cronkite report, "We've lost Cronkite, we've lost America," right? He knew it was going bad if Walter Cronkite was talking shit about him on the news, right? And that's what was going on with Vietnam. But you notice that Noam Chomsky doesn't take responsibility, doesn't try to clean up the mess, doesn't try to excuse U.S. foreign policy, even though he's a United States citizen ostensibly. If he were able to become part of the ruling coalition of the U.S. government, he would have to clean up that mess. But you want to be really careful about your optics in associating yourself too strongly with a group like the Johnson administration or the Nixon administration, which Noam Chomsky has nothing but disagreements with. I'd say that Vaush probably has nothing but disagreements with, not nothing but disagreements, but has vast disagreements with Biden's foreign policy too, including, as he points out, him thinking that maybe Biden actually pulled out of Afghanistan too quickly. Now, let's be real about Afghanistan. The United States has been there since basically 9/11. Since right after 9/11, the United States has been there, has been occupying them, has been trying to force their government down a certain track. The fact that the Taliban is still active, the fact that the Taliban still has popular support, should show us that we didn't do a good job instituting a government on them. And in fact, why would you expect any different? When you take a people and you sort of force a government down their throat, like we did to South Vietnam, like we did to Afghanistan, sometimes when you pull out, the result is they say, we want anything but that. In fact, you can even help your opponents. You can even help factions that you hate by supporting, just like we did, supporting this Khmer Republic that then the king and Pol Pot kind of got together to fight, right? You end up empowering your enemies. I know all about this in social media, right? This actually happens in social media too. So essentially, the U.S. foreign policy made Pol Pot look better than he actually was. Made him look like an alternative when he should have been seen as a scary person who should be kept away from power at all costs. But instead, essentially this was a coup, right? Essentially this was the U.S. saying, oh, that's your government? Nope, this is your government, right? So stuff like this makes strange bedfellows, and it did in Cambodia, and it led to a lot of pain and misery. It sounds like some of the deaths were due to overwork and stuff like that. It sounds like some of the deaths were probably due to brutality, like it was claimed. But a lot of the deaths were due to U.S. foreign policy intervention, i.e. the bombing of Cambodia. So that's what we're dealing with, and I feel like Vaush, if he's made a mistake, it's in optics, and it's in being perceived as being so close to Biden that now he has to make excuses. And Vaush, you don't. You're a leftist. Your foreign policy would be totally different. Like, I hope your foreign policy would be totally different. I feel like Vaush got himself in a bad place optically here. I don't really blame him for it. Did he get canceled, though? Fuck no. Dude, if Caleb Maupin and Jimmy Dore hate your guts, that's a good thing. You didn't get canceled. You're crying wolf. It's fake valor. Vaush always does this shit. Oh my god, I get canceled. I'm so fucking oppressed. Poor Vaush. He's getting oppressed by the tankies this time. No, dude, that's not what it is. Like, Vaush, it's just funny because, like, you've made such a bugaboo about cancel culture. You've called it, like, the worst thing in the world. And when you have a chance to intervene in actual cancel culture, you've sat on your hands, okay? So I'm not super impressed with that. I think that a lot of your complaints about cancel culture is stolen valor. Vaush, if you really want to understand cancel culture, understand it as scapegoating. And now they see it as a problem. They're like, ooh, cancel culture, right? But this shit's been going on to women, to queers, to trans people, to anyone who doesn't fit in, anyone who's an outsider has been subject to exclusion. I mean, this is what Mark Fisher talked about, where he got the idea in the Vampire Castle for the system of excommunication. The first, what did he call it? The first configuration of the Vampire Castle, the priestly desire to excommunicate, right? You know, this is something that marginalized people have been suffering for a long time, and people like Mark Fisher and Vaush, you know, kind of come along and, like, you know, cry wolf about it, cry poor me. But if they'd really look into it, they'd find that yes, cancel culture is a huge problem, and the way that it affects you, Vaush, is mild compared to the way it absolutely arrested the progress of my career. So yeah, I'm a little bit salty about this, okay? I'm a little bit salty about this guy going off about cancel culture for years and years, and it turns out that all he did it for was to save his own skin and that of his friends, right? When he talks about cancel culture, he's talking about himself and his friends getting canceled. He doesn't really care about somebody like Ferociously Steph getting canceled. In fact, he actually helped that campaign. So yeah, I'm gonna call fake valor here, Vaush. I think that you're crying wolf on cancel culture.
You know, yeah, Shionhead does this too. The reality is that the real terror of foreign occupation is destabilization in the long run, you know? So you have your boots on the ground, and the U.S. comes in and they commit horrible atrocities. They kill a bunch of people in sanctions and starvation.
Okay, so he gets the point. It's not like...
long-standing...
And don't misunderstand. I'm not saying Vaush is ignorant. I'm not saying Vaush is wholly wrong about this. I just think that he's painted himself into a corner with this anarcho-Bidenist kind of thing that he's gotten himself into. And I get the point. I get wanting to get Trump the fuck out of the White House. I agree with that. I think it's good for the material conditions of your comrades to get Trump out of the White House. So I'm in support of you know, riding with Biden in that sense. It's just that, like, listen, when you're riding with Biden, let me show you how to do it, okay? You're riding with Biden, let me show you how to do it. If I can find this clip. If you want to ride with Biden, do it like this. That's how you ride with Biden. Don't actually get in the car with him. And the reason is that when you get in the car with him, people start to get confused, and they start to think that your encouragement to ride with Biden is an encouragement to stay in the car with him. Don't do that, right? Get on your skateboard and hitch a ride, okay? That's how you should be riding with Biden.
Destruction of infrastructure and of the civil society that we invaded ensures that unless there's some remnant of a legitimate government after we leave, things are just going to, like, fall apart. It's going to become a failed state after our absence. So the solution to that would be ideally to not invade other countries. That would be nice.
I don't disagree.
Why do we have a responsibility to influence the government that rules over Afghanistan? If you're going to leave Afghanistan, I think it's nice that you make sure the Taliban doesn't just conquer all of Afghanistan as soon as you leave.
Listen, I gotta disagree with that. Like, I get what you're saying, and if what you're saying is to plan it out and to do it strategically and to try to think of the material conditions of the people in that country that you've invaded on your way out. Like, let's say a leftist government takes over. Let's say the Vaush government takes over, you know, from some other government, and they have to unwind the neoliberal foreign policy of that government, right? We do want to do it strategically. We don't want to do it of just like, okay, every single place that we have troops, pull them out immediately. Like, right, you know, if you can do it in a way that's better than that, right? If you can look at what the effects are likely to be and maybe stop some of the bad ones from happening and, you know, just try to leave everything As good as you can. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Leftists should never find themselves in the place of rhetorically or otherwise having to clean up the messes of neoliberals, okay? That shit's not on us, okay? Those were bad decisions made in the past. We can ameliorate the outcomes, like he's saying, with strategic pullouts rather than just like, you know, kind of reactionary, I guess, pullouts. But I will say that in the end, the government of the Afghanistani people is kind of up to the Afghanistani people, right? And in a way, I don't mean democratically, I mean whatever faction takes hold in that place is the faction that's going to rule that place. Our intervention in it is the same thing as like a kid on the playground and your mom comes in and says, all right, my kid's getting picked on, I'm gonna hang out on the playground today. Anybody gonna pick on my kid, they're gonna get a knee, right? Okay, mom's not gonna knee anybody, but like, right, you know, you're messing with mom now, right? So as long as mom's on the playground, you're good. Now mom says, okay, it looks like nobody's messing with you anymore, I'm gonna go home now. What's gonna happen to you? You're gonna get your ass kicked because mom's not there anymore. Mom was only there as a temporary thing, and like, if anything, you are going to get your ass kicked more, not less, for having mom there. This is why U.S. foreign policy intervention fails so often. It ends up helping the side that we were trying to get in the way of. It ends up harming the side that we were trying to promote. When people work with us, they're called collaborators. They're seen as traitors, and rightly so, because we are an outside entity coming in telling them how to run their country, right? So by sponsoring a group, by putting our little patina of respectability on some faction in a country, we're actually potentially harming them long term. And yeah, this is why it sucks to have to play cleanup for neoliberalism.
I think that's nice, personally. I think that's cool. Poggers, almost, you know? Now
Poggers, indeed. Here's where I think you fucked up, Vaush, okay? The tankies got to pretend that you are a tool of American imperialism and that they are like the liberators of the world. That's bullshit. All right? Whether that's coming from Infrared, whether that's coming from Jimmy Dore, whether that's coming from Caleb Maupin, these people are jokes, okay? They should never be able to push back against you, Vaush, as some kind of a representative of neoliberal foreign policy, but you kind of got yourself into the situation where they did it. So did Vaush get canceled? No, because you're too big to be canceled and you know it, and that's just a meme anyway, right? So Vaush not canceled. Let's go ahead and just take this ridiculousness the fuck off of there, because that's not what happened. Did Vaush look bad optically, and did some tankies and other scumbags look kind of good? Maybe so. How do we get around that? By making it clear that when we're riding with Biden, we're getting off before he gets to his destination.